Welcome to episode 3 of Home Game, my hobby channel where I just talk about whatever nerdy or interesting things that pop up for me that week. So, this next video isn't something I planned initially. I was going to do a cheap dice haul video. I have a number of new and cheap dice I got from various sources. So, I'll still do that later on this month. Um, my thought process was this uh, do a cheap dice haul video. But what are some features to look out for on cheap dice? Because cheap dice often have common features that are unpreferred. Um, then I thought, well, just features that I don't prefer all around on dice that I see. Uh, and then I just figured, let's do my unpreferred features on dice video. So I kind of went around in a circle here. These are my opinions. I own dice in all of these categories, so obviously it didn't stop me from buying them initially. Uh, and though these are numbered, they are in no particular order. So the first one that came to mind was D8s that have the 1 right next to the 8. Uh, this I see on expensive dice that are like one of a kind people are making, and I think it's because um, some of the less expensive dice molds do this. They put the 1 right next to the 8. Um, I mean, it's not a deal breaker. The dice still work. If anything, it's kind of added insult that if you roll a 1, you're also staring at an 8 on the side. So, if anything, it might be more cruel than other dice because you get to see the 1, but then you get to see the highest number on the die also right next to it. The, that you barely missed when you're rolling for your damage. A percentile die with non-sideways numbers. That's my number 2. I just think that if you turn the number sideways and put the 0 on the smaller end, make the 0 a little bit smaller, uh, you can make the important number a lot bigger. So I know that each of these sides has a 0 on it. The only reason you need to include it is if you're rolling it with a regular D10 and you're trying to distinguish between the two. When you turn the number the other way, then you have to make it much smaller to fit on the die side. So, and I understand if other people prefer it that way, because then it kind of lines up with all of your other dice. If you line them all up, all the numbers are going the same direction, and that's a valid point too. But I just prefer the numbers to be turned sideways, so you can make them bigger and easier to read. Number 3 are D4s with numbers on the bottom. This doesn't actually bother me, but I know some people feel pretty strongly about it. Like they want the number to be on top. Like every other die, the number's on top, but on a D4, they'll put it on the bottom. The other thing that does is the same complaint I have about the percentile dice is that potentially you have all this empty space now in the corners when you could have just made that number bigger and put it up top. So you'll see that traditionally the number with the D4s with the numbers at the point, the numbers are a little bit bigger, so they're easier to read. Pyramid shaped D4s. So this this used to bother me more than it does now because when you roll a pyramid shaped D4, or it's not technically a pyramid, but that's how I'm referring to it, on a hard surface, they bounce around and roll just fine. Um, but I went on a search for non pyramid shaped D4s. And this is what I have. These are some that I have in my collection right now. I really think the ones that come from Kraken Dice are interesting because they knock the points off of the D4 and then they put a tiny number Like, I don't know if I can zoom into this thing and show you or not. You'll have to forgive me. I'm bouncing around here. They put a tiny number on the flat of the point that they took off, which is which I think is just a crazy amount of detail to add to just a simple D4, because it's clear what that number is, and they thought, let's just grind off the point and put it directly on top. And I've never seen anybody else do that. If you've seen anybody else do that, then go ahead and shoot me a link. The D6 underlined, the D6 with the 6 on it underlined. I mean, there's really no point. There's no 9 represented on that die. I mean, it doesn't. It's not like it bothers me every time I see it. It's just unnecessary. That's not just on cheap dice. That's on all dice. Like the on the left is a dice from Chessex, and on the right is a super cheap die that came with a game that I own. Like I said, it's not like it bothers me every time I see it, but it's just unnecessary. In most cases, it's unnecessary to underline it because even on a D20, you read it from the flat. So if if the flat is at the bottom of the number, so overly busy designs, they can look really good, but they can also look muddy. So it makes it hard to read. I actually own the set on the left here, and I think this is an example of a really detailed die that's not hard to read. I'm sure the numbers are a little bit smaller than they need to be to make room for all of the extra designs, but they look really good, and you can read the numbers just fine. And it's not really competing with much. But then you look on the right here, and this is a Q Workshop set. Um, and just at a quick glance, you're not going to be able to read these things. Now, I've seen someone coloring these numbers red, and they look amazing. Like they're super clear to read with the contrasting color added. And red and green look good together if you want to get past the Christmas attachment. Um, but it, like just like blood and grass, essentially, if you were to just color the numbers in red, these would look pretty phenomenal. I couldn't find the picture that I've seen before, but I've seen a picture of that and they look amazing. Overly polished dice. You don't. It's not so much that you see this on cheap dice, but you see it on like the Chessex pounded dice bags where they're misprints and um, they're generally rejects in some way anyway. And you might dump it out and find a number on one of the sides nearly polished off of the die. Like they just left it in the tumbler way too long. I have a couple of those laying around here. I didn't dig any out to take a picture of, but it's like they're almost your D20 is almost turning into a sphere because they just left it in the tumbler too long. And my last one, number 8, is clear dice with impurities. So I don't salt test all my dice. I don't prep that mixture and make sure they all roll fair. But when your die is clear and I can see an air bubble in it, or it's supposed to be clear but it's super foggy, it's not like really clear. And this happens over time too. If you just leave them out, the clear plastic will start to get foggy. So it takes like a what looked amazing to begin with, and a couple years later, it's like a super foggy die now, which can also look cool if that's what you're going for. But the like Chessex released these dice that were supposed to look like frosted glass, and I really wanted to get the red set. And I looked at game shops, every time I went there, I looked at their chess six dice. I couldn't find a single one that one of their dice didn't have an impurity in it, and they were clear, frosted, so I could see any kind of air bubble or impurity in the die. And I wasn't gonna buy two sets just to cobble together one set that looked good. So, and those things aren't cheap now. I think when you go to eBay, those things aren't. You can't just pick those up for $10 anymore. So those are my 8 unpreferred dice features in cheap dice and otherwise. Number one, D8s with the ones right next to the 8. Number two, percentage dice with sideways numbers. 3, D4s with numbers on the bottom. 4, pyramid shaped D4s. 5, D6s with the 6 underlined. 6, overly busy designs. 7, overly polished dice. And 8, clear dice with impurities. So this month, Professor Dungeon Master over at Dungeon Craft posted a video that said he wanted to try to turn July into Independent TTRPG month. And I'll post a link to his channel so you can watch that. And I know that I don't exactly have 1,000 subscribers or anything watching my videos, but I try to post this on my other social media accounts to try and engage other people to come and either drop a comment or like and whatever you want to do to listen to my amateur or humble opinion on things. So I'm going to take up this challenge, I think, and I'm going to review some independent TTRPGs that I have. I just got Sly Flourish's draft of Forge of Foes. I'd like to discuss that. I mean, everything this guy puts out, I try to buy when it comes to trying to learn how to be a better dungeon master. His books help more than the official DMG, in my opinion. They really break down the easiest way to improv and design monsters and dungeons and encounters. His channel is free over on YouTube. Just go to his channel, listen to him talk. He also has a Patreon and stuff like that. But I mean, I'll dig into these different people when I get to their stuff. But I also have DM Scotty's Easy D6, and I bought his adventure book that he put out, or his encounter book that he put out. I have Index Card RPG, and then I want to touch on some really cheap ones because I'm always trying to game on a budget, and I love some of these like zine type or one page TTRPGs that I see. So I might do one video where I try to cover a bunch of those and just blast that out. So anybody who stuck around to listen to my rambling for this long, thank you. And I'll see you next time, I guess.